What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me my two great co-hosts, Fede Perez and Ralph Hannah. And guys, it is December. It is the final month of the year for 2024, a year that has been full of ups and downs in Paraguayan football. I mean, we covered it all from the local league, from the players abroad, from the national team. I mean, it's been a wild ride. I mean, thankfully, we can say that it's on a positive note, especially with Paraguay doing so well in the World Cup qualifiers. You know, obviously, the attention for 2025 is going to be big because obviously it's a big year for Paraguay as a whole on many events, and certainly I think for Paraguay, I think they've dealt with so much in this entire year. They've kind of been the host to so many people. You know, we're talking fresh from the Sudamericana final that Racing beat Cruzeiro at La Nueva Olla. We also talk about the Paraguayans abroad who have won titles everywhere. You know, the one specifically with Botafogo winning their first ever Copa Libertadores with Angel Romero and Gatito Fernandez on the team. We're also talking about what's going on with the Club World Cup because there are some Paraguayans that will be playing in that competition this time in about 6 months here in the United States. So obviously our attention is going to be on what they're going to be doing. And also what's going on in the local league, because obviously we saw Olimpia win the Clausura. We also have the teams that will qualify for the Copa Libertadores and the Sudamericana next year. We also have the teams that went down and the teams that will come up for 2025. So lots been going on, especially in these kind of final weeks of the year, Fede. I want to go to you first because I think, on such a special time, we have Virgen de Cacubé, one of the special days, the Immaculate Conception, the Day of the Immaculate Conception, one of the most special days in all of Paraguay on the calendar, hugely religious Catholic event. I think a lot of people will go there, I would say, to give thanks for maybe their team doing well, maybe their national team doing well, their players. It's been a wild year, I'd say, for Paraguay as a whole. And yeah, I'm happy that all three of us are able to talk about it every so often and celebrate this kind of success with them.
It's great to be back, Roberto. Hi to you, hi to Ralph, hi to everyone listening to Guarani Vision. First of all, first things first, happy birthday, Roberto, because as we're recording, our dear host is on his birthday. He's working on his birthday, so appreciate that, people, and donate if you can, because we got that open also. You can look for that link on our social media. We started out that this year, and obviously we do have so much to talk about because the year is wrapping up. We have to look back at everything that has happened, and to be honest with you guys, the more I think of it, it was probably a better 2024 for the national team than for the local league, right? For the clubs, because they didn't do well in Sudamericana, they didn't do well in Libertadores. It was other teams that had the runs. And to be honest with you guys, the Clausura was obviously done 2 weeks before it was supposed to be over. We had Olimpia already champions. We talked about that on the last episode, so we definitely got to talk about other things like stadiums building up, like everything that's looking like it's going to be interesting for 2025, because I know you guys are very excited after the draw that happened yesterday. The next 2 years are going to be very exciting for the U.S., for the United States, with so many events happening, with the World Cup also happening over there. So I'm really looking forward to everything that's going to happen from now on. But it is the end of the season, and there's even guys retiring, football players like Christian Riveros from Libertad. I don't know if he's going to be the only one, but a legend is going to leave the football, is going to leave the fields, especially on this last game that's going to be played on the Copa Paraguay. That's probably going to be on our next show as we're heading into the last shows of the year, Roberto. Really happy for a couple of guys, the way they're ending it. A couple of Paraguayans that are doing really well. Hopefully some make that leap to a bigger club. I think some already have that under their wings, pretty much confirmed. So yeah, we're going to be on top of that during the whole summer here as we're heating up in Paraguay.
And here it's getting cold in the United States, and maybe for Ralph it's a bit of both. But yeah, obviously, Ralph, I mean, certainly for the year as a whole, I think it's been kind of, like I said, it's been a roller coaster ride. A lot of highs on what we've seen from the national team, especially in the later part of 2024. Not so much on the club level, like Fede was saying, in international competitions. A lot of Paraguayans abroad also sharing some success. Like I said, obviously there's a lot of players going for titles who have won titles, who are getting big money moves. Here we are talking. I just saw a video this morning of Diego Gomez, who unfortunately will not be playing in the MLS Cup final with Inter Miami. It's Carlos Coronel, who's taking on the LA Galaxy tomorrow, playing as the goalkeeper for the New York Red Bulls. But I did see a video this morning that was really nice of him, enjoying his vacations before he makes this big money move to Brighton, to the Premier League, to England, buying a house for their parents, kind of a Christmas gift and really a special gesture. And, something that a lot of these players do usually when they do make big money moves or make that big kind of salary is, they always do something for their parents. They buy houses or, some sort of property for them to allow them to relax and whatnot after the sacrifice that they made. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly going to be a big year for a lot of people, a lot of Paraguayans, be it on a national team, abroad, club, whatever. I think at least we can say from a general sense that maybe the way that Paraguay, if I had to do like a report card, I would say I'd say they get a passing grade. I'd say they as a whole, what's going on with Paraguayan football, I think they would get a passing grade. I don't know if I could give a letter, maybe Ralph or Fede, you can help me on that one, but I think they'd pass enough to go and get ready for next year.
Hello everybody, firstly, and yeah, the APF president Robert Harrison, he'd be pleased with you, Roberto, for giving him a passing grade because he's going around. He's very excited about the fact that the national team is doing so well at the moment and is really promoting that. But I think Fede touched on it. It's been such a kind of whirlwind year because while the team is doing very well, the national team in the local league with Olimpia winning the championships with one of the lowest points totals in recent times, people are saying, "Oh, maybe the quality isn't as good as it has been." And then we're seeing this thing of do the teams have stadiums for next year? Because now they're all renovating stadiums. What's going to happen in Intermedia because they have the new rule about the under-23s players. So there's actually a lot kind of coming down the pipe that could make 2025 a bit of a tumultuous year for local football in Paraguay. But you're right to say that abroad, things are looking really good. I mean, you talked about Diego Gomez making a move. There's a couple of guys like Isidro Pita, ended top scorer for Cuiabá, who are going to get relegated in Brazil, but still, he's ended up top scorer. Alex Arce is breaking all kinds of records in Ecuador. And I think his agent was on the radio in Ecuador yesterday just saying that as soon as an offer comes in either to us or to Liga de Quito, we're going to be moving on it. So, Liga de Quito are happy to kind of cash in now. There's a lot of things that could happen. You mentioned the final with Carlos Coronel, but also we've got we had the draw for the FIFA Club World Cup, I guess. Yeah, Club World Cup. And I saw, for example, Kaku and Matias Segovia are going to be playing against Pep Guardiola's Manchester City. So, I mean, there's really some nice moments happening around the world for Paraguayan football to really become like center stage in all of this. So it's very exciting. And then I think just when you talked about the passing grade, yeah, the questions really surround the local league. And I think the big factor or the big kind of marker for next year to see what is the strength of the local league is actually to see how the teams do in Copa Libertadores and Copa Sudamericana, because that's kind of the best way to see how is the league doing, at least in the region of South America.
Yeah, and going to that Club World Cup, I want to mention it real quick, Fed. I mean, obviously, it was a bitter taste that Olimpia couldn't make it because obviously it was all dependent on if River Plate were the champions of South America. Unfortunately, it was Botafogo that was able to take their place. And imagine if they were in that group with PSG, Atletico Madrid, and Seattle Sounders. I mean, that would have been a huge, huge thing for them. Unfortunately, that isn't the case. But we still have Paraguayans playing, like you said, Ralph. You got obviously Kaku Romero and Matias Segovia taking on not just Manchester City, they're taking on Juventus as well. Palmeiras with Gustavo Gomez, they got to take on Inter Miami, with the Paraguayans there, like Matias Rojas. You have Botafogo, of course, with, like I said, Angel Romendo, Gatito Fernandez taking on PSG and Atleti. You have a lot of players that are also playing all around. River Plate with Alan Barreiro taking on Inter Milan, for example. Yeah, there's so much going on, and I think it's certainly going to be a big test. And I think for these Paraguayans, if they do get lucky and they do go on a team that goes and win it all, I mean, champion of the world. That's how it is. Of course, at least that's what FIFA say. Best club team in the world if they do win it.
I love that trophy, guys. Like 4D, 3D. I don't know what is that. They took it
Has
out
a key. Has a key as well. Apparently,
has a key and everything. Not tremendous work by FIFA. The way that Gianni Infantino sold it, doing stand-up comedy there. No, they're doing a great job. with these new tournaments. I don't know if the European teams are happy. I don't know if the players are happy with the vacations and the calendar and all these stuff that you're hearing about these last couple of years. But obviously, we're looking forward to the competition, looking forward to seeing our Paraguayans having an opportunity. I'm looking at the list of players, and I don't know if all these players are going to be, first of all, starting in their teams, and even in first spot, I would say, are they going to be playing for those teams? Because they probably didn't have the best of the season. You mentioned Alan Barreiro for River. I don't know if he's going to be on the plans for Gallardo next season, as they say that River's going to go all out next season and probably hire a couple of forwards. We'll see if Alan stays in this club. They signed him for a long term, but I don't know. He hasn't produced. He hasn't scored as much as he did with San Lorenzo, his other team, or his team, or where he was coming from, his former team. And obviously, if there's a player to pin out of the whole list, I would say Gustavo Gomez with Palmeiras. He's probably the one that has the biggest role in one of these teams, right? Obviously, Cacu Romero is also very important for Alain, but I've been hearing rumors that Cacu wants to come back to South America, that he's thinking about moving the family back to Argentina or something like that. I don't know if that's going to happen already at the beginning of the year, or if he's going to want to play this Club World Cup. Segovia doesn't have a starting job in that team. He comes and goes, but he's getting game time. That's important for him. You just talked about Botafogo, the Libertadores champion. Roberto Fernandez is not a starter in that team. Neither is Oscar Romero. There's rumors about even Oscar Romero looking for another team during this offseason. We'll see what happens with that. We mentioned Diego Gomez moving to Brighton. So there's a whole bunch of players on this list, Roberto, but I think we might actually see new names because I do think there's going to be a couple of hirings, especially now that teams know who they're going to face and what they need to get ready for. So why not think that, right now it's about 8-9 players maybe as a Paraguayans that could play this World Cup. It might get longer, I think, just because of the really good players that we have out there, with possibility to also be signed by one of these teams.
Yeah, I was about to say, Ralph, I think that's also into consideration. The tournament doesn't start for another 7 months, so you got 2 transfer windows that you can deal with. So that could be the case of maybe some Paraguayans. And I think with the national teams doing well, I think there's a lot of people looking at Paraguay differently, looking at some players that they could probably go out for their teams there. I don't know anything, and I'm sure you guys don't either, about any new players going into some of these teams that are in the Club World Cup. But yeah, that is a possibility that there could be some Paraguayans playing in it that we don't know. That could indeed help them in the long term. And I think it's gonna be a packed calendar, like you said. I think there's so many players playing so many games. We're talking about some other Paraguayans that are not really getting playing time in England, for example. But yeah, that could be a big deal. I think if some of these teams are able to sign some of these Paraguayans for this competition.
Yeah, that's right. It'd be very cool to be on the world stage. The kind of the eyes of the world will be on this tournament because I think it's going on free to air TV. So and it's going to have huge broadcast numbers. And so what a great way for some of our Paraguayan players to get into that spotlight. And of course, we haven't even mentioned, I think there's 3 Mexican teams in there. And traditionally, Mexico was a home for many Paraguayan players. What we've seen recently is more that shift to Brazil and to the US. But you still have that possibility of seeing some players turning up there as well. So definitely it's something to look out for and to look forward to. And talking about players, actually, I have a question from one of our followers, Steve, who he was interested in knowing more about the players currently in Paraguay that could be the next Enciso or Diego Gomez. He said, the media is a bit limited in terms of English media that's local to there. So who are the players to watch that could be the next one? And with the kind of season wrapping up, and I was having a think about this question. I mean, for me, the most exciting player I've seen this year in the Paraguayan league domestically is Ruben Lescano, who of Libertad, left-footed midfielder. He finished the season very well with some really good goals. He had like a really well taken individual goal, scores against Cerro in that game as well. So he could be very exciting. I think he's about the same age as Julio Enciso. I think 2004 as well. So he could be one of the players to look out for next year.
Yeah, that's a wise choice. I mean, Fede, I would probably go for Ruben Lescano as well. I think he's certainly such a talented. Well, yeah, that's right. He was born in 2004, so definitely the same age as Enciso, coming from that Libertad Academy. Coming from that kind of La Huerta, as they say over there in Tuchuqua. Diego Gomez coming from there, Enzo Gonzalez, two players who are in the or soon to be in the Premier League. Yeah, I think Lescano has to be the one. I mean, you have Diego Leon, who he's kind of been attracting the attention over there in Cerro Porteño and what he did. But again, the year has been kind of inconsistent for him. You have Cesar Almeida, who got a really interesting call up for the national team the last time round. So that's another young player that could get the attention. But I'm going for Liscano as well. I mean, how do you feel? Who you got?
Yeah, they've all had their moments, right? I mean, they've had their peaks. I mean, I remember Lescano went through an injury and he was out a couple of months, but yeah, he's definitely ending the year in very good form. He's definitely one of the players to look out for. I thought he was gonna end the year probably leaving already the league last year. It didn't end up happening. And then we had a whole bunch of players that went through a very important year. Roberto, very young players that went through the Olympics, that played the Olympics, right? A lot of them didn't have the starting job when they came back to their clubs, and they kind of struggled, right, to be those stars in the local league. We thought that was going to happen. And then we had a couple of players that really shocked me, but they couldn't maintain the level. I'm talking about Diego Leon, for instance, 17 years old, left back from Cerro Porteño. At a certain moment, this guy looked like he was going straight to the Premier League, but that's not the way he's ending the year. So there you have a couple of players to look out for, maybe to see how they start their year off in 2025. And then you have to think about just how old do you want to buy a player? Because there's a lot of players here in Paraguay that are about 22, 23 that are in very good form as of right now. I mean, I just talked about the Olympics, and I could mention Marcelo Fernandez, another player from Libertad. I think he's probably one of the players that has played a lot. Gustavo Caballero has been somebody that has amazed me this year. Also coming out of Nacional, they're going head to head now in the final of the Copa Paraguay. We'll see who plays better in that game. But those are players around 22, 23 years old. They can still make that leap because they have a huge career ahead of them. But yeah, the players that are usually going to the Premier, like Julio Enciso, the ones that are making that leap straight to Europe, are usually the ones that are around 17, 18 years old. And there's not a bunch of those players playing right now in first division constantly, at least.
Yeah, I think they would have made that move very soon. I think they probably at that age, they probably wouldn't have been able to stay there. I mean, you look at some of the players, like I'm just thinking right top of my head, like Damian Bobadilla, for example. He did so well, etc. And then boom, San Pablo goes and buys him. Yeah, Mateo Gamarra, same thing. So, him going to Brazil. There's a lot of examples there, but yeah, I'd probably go for Lescano as the guy that, he's gonna make that big move. Don't know where. We don't know if he's good enough for Europe or if he's going to go to an MLS or South America or a different league like a Saudi. But yeah, he's definitely the one to look out for. So thank you, Steve, for the question. And yeah, thank you as well for the donation. It was really, really kind of you to do it. Now we go into what we saw for the remainder of the Clausura, because obviously we have our teams that will be qualifying for the Copa Libertadores and the Sudamericana. We have Olimpia, of course, winning the championship. They got qualified to the group stage. Libertad also winning the Apertura. They're in the group stages of the Copa Libertadores. Cerro Porteño, 74 points. Not enough to win any of these titles, but they are in the second phase of the Copa Libertadores. They are also without a new coach. Carlos Javier said that he wasn't going to be the new coach for next year. So that means Cerro Porteño will go into 2025 without a coach. And of course, now going for their fourth straight year without a title. Obviously, the ambition is always to do well in these competitions. Nacional, they'll be in the first stage of the Copa Libertadores, because of the Copa Paraguay. Between the Libertad Nacional, they'll be playing in the competition. In the Sudamericana, we got Guarani, 2 de Mayo, Sportivo Luqueño, and Sportivo Almeliano making the jump. Almeliano are back in it. 2 de Mayo, a team that got promoted this year, had a really great year, and they're playing in international competitions 1 year after getting promoted. The teams that unfortunately will not be here next year will be Sol de America and Tacuarembó, and they will be replaced by Deportivo Recoleta, the champion of the Intermedia, and Atlético Tembetaru, also making their debut in this kind of new run of the the Paraguayan league. So yeah, really a lot to go into. I guess I'll go to Fede first of like what's really jumped up for you, what's kind of surprised you, what you expected, and yeah, just what's a team that you're looking forward to seeing and how they're going to handle 2025 in the international competitions.
Well, first of all, as for the relegation, because I wanted to talk a little bit about that. First of all, I was surprised to see how fast Sol America came and left, because they're a very traditional team, and they're actually one of the few teams that were able to clinch a title back in the 90s. And they weren't able to maintain their spot. They really started out bad and try to end it in a better way with the uh, under the coach, under Tiburon Torres, but they couldn't do it, and in those last games they fell apart. As for Tacuarí, you could see it happening, right? Just the way they kind of struggled during the whole year, putting in money from somewhere else, bringing in players from an agent, and then all those players kind of leaving the club at those last games. It was kind of weird the way they melted away from competition. And I'm really happy about the new teams, though. I mean, I do think Atletico Temperataria has that wallet behind them to really get into first division and put a lot of money into that, into building a good roster, right? To compete in first division. That's something that Sol America did not do. Sol America pretty much try to play with the same players as they did it in Intermedio in the second division. And Deportivo Recoleta, I don't know what kind of team they're going to bring into first division as in, to compete, but they're going to bring something very interesting, because they're going to bring artificial surface. Their president wants to play an artificial surface, and apparently they're getting a couple of stadiums ready for that, and they're going all out. This is going to be something totally new for 2025. As for relegation, as for the new teams, as I'm looking into the season for the international teams, Roberto, my eyes are obviously all in for Olympia. I mean, this is the team that it might open up the window to transfer and to gain a couple of players, sign a couple of players, maybe more players from the local league than international players, but they're still going to have to bring something from outside of the country. They're still going to have to bring in maybe somebody from Argentina, maybe somebody that's not playing in Europe and wants some game time. They need to bring a star probably to this team, because they do need to play better. They played way too defensively during the whole clausura, and I do think they need to step it up if they want to do something in Libertadores. And Olimpia is the big traditional team in Libertadores, so they don't go into this competition just to see what happens. They need to get in there and really do something in the group stage and try to get forward. As for Cerro Porteño, it's just rebuilding. We'll see what they do with the new coach, with the new signings. Apparently, that whole locker room is fading away. A lot of players are going to leave that locker room, and we're going to see practically a brand new team, or probably 50% of the team is going to be totally brand new. At least half of the team, I believe, is going to be totally brand new for the next season. As for Libertad, I think they're going to have a new coach. I don't think Sergio Aquino is going to be their coach next season. We'll see what kind of coach they get and what kind of signings they do, because lately Libertad hasn't spent that much. They've actually kind of stayed with the same squad. They haven't let go of too many players. They haven't made that many signings this year, but they only won one competition so far, and they want to dominate the local league at least. So I'm hoping for them to also get a couple of signings out there. They're gonna get their stadium back, because we're talking about all these stadiums rebuilding and going through different stages, but Libertad's probably going to be the first one that's going to have their stadium back, and they're going to start the season in their stadium playing home again. I think that's a huge advantage for them. They usually don't lose at their home ground, so that could be in their favor, especially if they're able to play in international games there, which was actually the idea behind also putting in more space in their stadium. So that's the way I see it, Roberto. At least for the Libertadores. In Sudamericana, it's totally wide open, especially because teams have to go against each other, right, before playing against teams from other countries. But for the Libertadores, my eyes are on Olimpia and trying to keep their stars and see what they sign.
Yeah, I think it's huge that Olimpia has Martin Palermo as their coach, right? I think the fact that he is now in the Libertadores with Olimpia and he's won a title, the player that he was, the contacts that he has, now they can attract some quite interesting players to improve the team, which, like Fede mentions, that they definitely need to do, not just to maintain something in the local league, but to give it a good go in the Copa Libertadores. And then Libertad is really interesting for me partly because of the stadium issue, but also Tata Martino has just left Inter Miami. I know he's mentioned like family issues, personal issues. He wants to be closer to the family. He has a great relationship with Horacio Cartes. I mean, when he was Libertad manager previously, but also when he was in the national team, they have stayed in contact. They were in contact. I know this for sure before Diego Gomez moved. That's partly how the Diego Gomez move happened. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Tata Martino shows up in Libertad's training ground around the end of January. And if that happens, then there's real contender to do something. I mean, we know what he's done in Paraguayan football. We know the kind of players he can attract as well. So that's definitely Libertad's like almost like the sleeping giant, just to keep an eye out for, because something really big could happen. Cerro's going to be very difficult. I think, as we mentioned, they still have a very good youth setup. I think they just won the reserve tournament again. So they always have like some players coming through. But as we saw last year with, let's say, Gabriel Aguayo, very good player, very talented, but he doesn't really have the right structure around him to really help him flourish. And without a coach at the moment, that could be a Nacional is almost, no offense, but they've almost qualified through, right? Because they would not have made the Libertadores in the standings over the year. They've made it through the Copa Paraguay, and only because Libertad, the other finalists, are already qualified. So that, again, that could be a difficult even to get past the qualifying stage. And then in Sudamericana, it's at the moment, the way the setup with the league system, it's really difficult for Paraguayan teams to make an impact. I think we saw that with Emiliano had some amazing results, but they still can't really make a big dent in the tournament because it's not a classic knockout tournament where that could have got very interesting. The one thing I'd like to see, and actually maybe Fede knows the answer, is Dos de Mayo, if they're allowed to play in their stadium for the international games, because it has been used in big tournaments before, like the Copa America. And that's a very interesting place to go. It's right very north on the border with Brazil. It can sometimes get very like misty and foggy, and you could have some crazy nights in Pedro Juan Caballero for Copa Sudamericana, but I don't know if it's CONMEBOL approved, that stadium.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting just to see a lot of these teams deal with so much stuff going on. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, honestly. It's going to be really fun. It's going to be really interesting to see which teams are able to do well, and maybe some perform better than what they expected. I'm really curious to see what, like Emiliano and Dos de Mayo are able to do in the Sudamericana. I mean, for Olympia's case, it kind of feels as if though they need to go back on top. And, a lot of these teams outside of Argentina and Brazil, they really need to step it up a notch if they want to compete against them, Fede. I mean, that's kind of the big goal for them. And for Cedro, again, it feels like it could be Groundhog Day for them again, just dealing with the same old if they don't get it right.
Yeah, but the way we're ending the year, it doesn't feel like we're on our way to a championship team in Libertadores or Sudamericana next year. As of right now, maybe just like Rob said, I mean, maybe with a couple of signings, Martino going to Libertad would be huge. That would be a game changer if Palermo can attract a couple of good players. I think we can be in a totally different place in a couple of months. I do think Olimpia is trying to rebuild as a big team, as a big club. That's why they're doing the whole stadium rebuild, also aiming beyond 2025. They're kind of coming back, and that's very important for Paraguayan football. They're usually the ones that stand out in the international stage. And then you have smaller clubs that are also gaining weight, that are becoming bigger and bigger. Rob just mentioned Emiliano. Emiliano's getting used to playing in international stage, and for those that matter, it could be once in a lifetime for them playing Sudamericana. So it's going to be really exciting to see those kind of teams also maybe have a really good run, and with a couple of good signings, they could be the big surprise in that competition.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be really fun. It's going to be really cool to see what they can do. And yeah, I'm honestly looking forward to it. As we switch gears to what's been going on also abroad, obviously we have a lot going on in that sense. Obviously, we'd mentioned Gatito Fernandez and Oscar Romero being the champion of the Copa Libertadores for Botafogo. Congratulations to them. First ever title. That's a big deal for them. They'll also be playing in the club, well, the Intercontinental Cup, as they say. It's the old Club World Cup format. It's weird how they say it, but they'll be going for another trophy for the end of the year, see if they can do it against the favorites are probably going to be Real Madrid playing in that final. So who knows if they can do another shock again like they did this entire year. They're also very close of winning the Brazilian league, actually, guys, because it could go between either Botafogo or Palmeiras, another title for Gustavo Gomez, or it'd be for Gatito and Oscar Romero. So very much up in there. Obviously, we got Carlos Coronel playing in the final of the MLS Cup against LA Galaxy. The Rebels have never won this title, by the way. They've been in this league for almost 30 years when they were the old Metro Stars back in the 90s. They are also looking to win their first ever title in their history. They'll be away, so they'll be kind of the underdogs in that sense. And obviously, we do need to mention about something that obviously has been going on in England between the futures of both Julio Enciso and Miguel Miron. Obviously, two players that have been in England for quite some time, but both of them are not finding their feet at the moment. Julio Enciso has not been playing for Paraguay for Brighton and Hove Albion under Fabian Hurtzeller for quite some time. We've even seen him play for the U23s. I think it was against Anderlecht a couple weeks ago. So it's very much a weird case of him not getting playing time, especially coming off the good form of what he was doing for Paraguay. The same thing for Almiron, but I think for Almiron's case, it kind of felt for a while that he wasn't in Eddie Howe's plans. And so I think the attention for January with the transfer window opening in England, I think, and I'll go to Ralph on this one. I think they are really on their way out than in, really, for both these two players. I think for Almiron, it's just a case of whether a team can match the valuation of what Newcastle want to give for him, and for Enciso, I think it's just playing time where all the signs point to possibly a loan, and kind of will feel a bit disappointing, especially with Diego Gomez coming in as well. So yeah, it's a weird time for both these two players.
Yeah, I think that's right. But it's also very contrasting situations, I think, because obviously Almiron is now 30 or close to 30 if he isn't already. He's got a family. They're very settled. They would happily stay, I think, in the UK. I don't think there's any rush for them to leave. But he's also, Newcastle clearly, they don't really want to use him, but also they need to move him on, I think, because of financial fair play and that kind of thing. So they're looking to get him out on a permanent deal, not a loan, right? And so eventually you think, I guess he must be thinking, okay, do I want to try and head back towards South America? Because those Brazilian teams will happily pay over 10 million, $15 million. I mean, we just saw that with Botafogo. One of the star players there, they brought him back from La Liga, from Betis. So, I mean, there's money in Brazil. That could be an option to stay closer. Can he stay in the UK? It might be complicated because it just doesn't seem. I think that would have happened in the summer, in the Northern Hemisphere summer. And so then there's always a question, because it's Newcastle, does he go to Saudi? Because of course there's the Saudi clubs with government money, the government money with Newcastle, so that maybe he just ends up kind of moving over there because they're the clubs that could pay for him. Then and one thing I wanted to mention is there's never been any question about his commitment, his professionalism. That's not the issue at all with Almiron. It's just the age he is, the kind of where they see the value, and it's more, I think, a bit more transactional than emotional. In the case of Enciso, I think it's very different, right? Because Julio Enciso is this huge talent. He has a potential. He's shown it, right, in Premier League games, in sparks, but he obviously isn't showing the consistency or the levels that, say, somebody like Mitoma, the Japanese winger, is showing. And that's why he's not even getting close to the team at the moment. And Brighton, what they're doing is they keep bringing in more players of a similar nature, of similar qualities. And I think it's coming down to, okay, maybe the talent is there, but he's not well-rounded enough as a player. And obviously Enciso is much younger. And I'm sure there's question marks over the kind of the way he uses social media, the way he projects himself. It's quite telling that he hasn't really played much since, I think he did an Instagram live with his agent. And he hasn't seen much game time since then in Brighton. And remember, the manager of Brighton being so young, for him, it must be very hard to control some of these players that are also a bit like unruly school children, right? I don't want to lower it to that level with Enciso, but I think it's very very difficult. Yeah, Roberto mentioned TikTok. That was it. He was on a TikTok live just before the Man United game. Yeah. So that kind of thing is maybe what's pushed them more. Brighton. It's not a talent thing. The talent is definitely there, but it's more, I don't know if we can deal with all of this. Let's use the players that we can trust more. And so yeah, it puts him in a difficult position. Where could he go? I mean, Brighton have the links, of course, with Belgium, but I don't think that's the right move for him. He's too good for there. Does he go to La Liga? I think somebody had mentioned Sevilla before, Porto. Is it a big club in a smaller league rather than a smaller club in a big league? So it could end up being something like that. But I'm sure it would be a loan move because his deal is so long. And like I say, this isn't really a quality issue. I think it's more as a professional, can he become more well-rounded? So then we can maybe see him back in the Premier League. But I think short term it looks like a loan somewhere.
Yeah, Fed, there's so many things going on really. And it feels kind of weird that a team's number 10, mind you, the shirt number that he has is number 10, and he's not getting any playing time. So there's been a lot of overreaction, I would say, I think, on social media in regards to like, oh, maybe Seller's not valuing him as much, or it could be other things. And maybe there are some things that maybe we don't know, maybe the English don't know as well. Knowing Julio Enciso, all of us have our own opinions that he is a talented player, but he is very much a wild card, an enigma. He can, just the way that he is, which could be a good or a bad thing. So it's a weird situation to be in, especially with him turning 21 next month. I think, he's still very, very young. And I think for everyone that saw him make that big jump so early, you would think, yeah, this is it. This is the place to stay, and that he's just going to go upwards and onwards, but it's not looking like that for him. And for Almiron, same thing as well. Like, just he's reaching that age where I think it's time for him to move on after 5 years now in the Premier League.
Yeah, for the players, you have to be worried, right? Because they're not playing, so obviously they're talking to their agents. They're looking into options. As Ciso's gonna have very different options, I am sure, in Europe, in different leagues. It's just a matter of picking the right one. I think he's shown that he can play in the Premier League. It's just a matter of, does another Premier League team wants him, and is he going to get a starting job in another Premier League team? I do think that, going to Spain, maybe going to Porto might give him more minutes to play and maybe get that jump to a bigger team later on. You have to justify yourself on the pitch, just like he did last year or last season around, when they ended up giving him the number 10 jersey to start off this season. As the games go by, as the season goes by, I'm not pointing my finger that much at the coach anymore, because I think the coach has given him certain opportunities, maybe not as many as he would have liked, but some things that are catching my attention is, yeah, that social media lifestyle that he has, everything that he posts, everything that he says. Does the club like that exposure from him? Does the coach like, are they on agreement with the way that he handles himself outside of the pitch? I think that's also an issue with a player like Julio Enciso, and I don't know how they're handling it. I don't know how they're working on it. I don't know if Julio Enciso is just doing whatever he wants and he's not listening to anybody, or maybe they're just not saying anything to him and they're just letting him be, and he's just not being the player that they want him to be. Like Ralph said, there are other players that are performing better on this team, so they are the ones that are playing, not Julio Enciso. But on the national team, he's been one of the best players this year. So he's going to definitely have offers, and I'm happy for him if he moves on, because I don't see him having an important role this season, at least with Brighton. So go get your game on somewhere else, and if Brighton needs you next season, come back or something like that. As for Miguel Almiron, I'm definitely going with him coming back to South America. I think he needs to compete. I don't see him staying in Europe, even though he probably loves the lifestyle. The family also wants to stay there, but I want to see him competing. And at the level that I'm seeing him on the national team, and as the World Cup gets closer and closer, I want to see these guys have big games. I want to see him play Libertadores. I want to see him play the World Cup. I don't know. There's been rumors about River all along his career. Ralph mentioned the Brazilian league. Obviously, it's always very tempting because of the salaries and everything that they're paying. But yeah, I think time for him to start coming back. Pack up your things and come get your game time over here, because the Libertadores is going to be really nice, and he's going to be closer to home. He's going to be closer to the national team, and we're getting there, guys. I mean, we're getting close to the World Cup, so the players have to be really smart about their next move.
Yeah, Ralph, just to go on that, that's actually a really good point, because obviously a lot of Paraguayans, we saw obviously players like Gatito Fernandez, Almiron, and Enciso. Those are three players I'm picking out. They weren't getting significant playing time in the months of the World Cup qualifiers, and all three of them have been standout players. They've been very much vital players. And I think getting that fitness is super important, and sharpness. Of course, it went well that, it could have gone really badly, that lack of fitness and sharpness might have hindered Paraguay more than helped them. That wasn't the case, thankfully. But I think now, in this kind of crucial moment where, Paraguay are in a position to qualify, they need to win a couple more games to do that. So I think it is really necessary for a lot of these players coming at this specific period right before the World Cup to be on form. And of course, I think for a lot of these guys that, I'm not saying that Almiron and Ciso and Gatito, like if the World Cup were to start tomorrow, they'll definitely are going to be on the team sheet 100%. But a lot of these players who, maybe aren't getting playing time, or, have those ambitions of going for the World Cup, and Fede, you might agree on me on this one, they're also playing for their spot on the team. Only 26 names can go on that squad. And, we see lists of 28, 30 here and there. So you're going to have to cut some players. And if they do indeed qualify, then a lot of these players are looking at those moves that they're making and being like, oh my God, I have to be on the best form possible so that I can be selected to play in the World Cup.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a big moment for those players to think about that. It does change a bit, because I think with somebody like Almiron, he has so much experience. I think he has about 200 games for Newcastle, more or less. So, I mean, he has that experience already, and how much he plays between now and the World Cup, it is important. He has to stay sharp. But again, it's not the same as an Enciso. That Enciso just is still very young. He needs more experience. He needs more games, especially those big games. So I think the Olympics, by the way, was really important for him to be able to get some of that experience when he hadn't really seen it in the Copa America, because in the Copa America they just played the group games. So this is a different kind of beast in a way. This knockout way of the World Cup qualifiers, how they are now, because you're in these last 6 games. It's almost like win and you're in, lose and you're out kind of thing. So it's much tenser. So I think again it does change depending on age as well. That's just a big factor. But you're right. I think a lot of players are looking at, where do I go next, and is it more important the salary I'm getting, or is it more important the minutes I'm getting? Because now I think for every Paraguayan player is playing in a World Cup. That's kind of the ultimate dream. It's not the Champions League. It's not the FIFA World Club Cup. That's for sure. Is the World Cup itself with the Albiroja. And so I think, yeah, you're right. That could really make a lot of people kind of maybe change their original destination now with the World Cup on the horizon.
Yeah, and just to close it out, I know Alfaro had said that, he was kind of asked about why, Enciso and Almiron are not playing, and that maybe they weren't going to be considered, but he didn't care about that. That being said, I think for a lot of these players, they want to play wherever they want to play, Fede. So I think for a lot of these guys, be it Enciso and Almiron, especially, like I said, at this crucial time, 1 year before the World Cup, 3 months before the next games against Chile and Colombia. Then June, you got that and the Club World Cup. You got a lot of games going on, and of course their own seasons as well. So it's all going to be piling up real quick. And so I think they're trying to think of making that move and be like, yeah, I need to raise my game, and also need to be at a position where I'm going to be perfectly fine, that I'm doing well in my club. I can get selected for the qualifiers. I can help my team qualify for the World Cup, and then it's just preparing yourself to not get injured or fall out of form or have any disciplinary issues or whatever, just to be ready for that. Because I think, like I said, this whole vision of 2025 really is for a lot of these Paraguayan players. They want to win stuff with their clubs, of course. That makes sense. That's not out of consideration. They want to do well. But they're looking at going on that team when they do get called up by Gustavo Alfaro and helping them qualify for the World Cup. Because the minute that they do qualify for the World Cup, that's going to be their attention of being like, I need to be good enough to be on that final squad.
Everybody wants to play for the national team now, right? Because they're doing so well. Everybody wants to be part of this parade of this tremendous team that beat Brazil, that beat Argentina this year at home, and they want to be on that ride. They want to be on that bus on that first game on the World Cup. Obviously, everybody's talking about that. The players are obviously gonna make their decisions around that. And I wouldn't even be surprised that certain players that we've seen called up by Schelotto, by Berizzo back in the days that haven't been called up by Alfaro yet, maybe even coming back to the local league just to put themselves out there, just to show themselves to the coach, because they haven't been called. They've been totally left aside. There's a long list of players like that, Roberto, that have lost their spot on their clubs, and they might need to come back here to try to make the next step.
Yeah, no, it's going to be really crucial for a lot of these players. And yeah, obviously a big 2025, as obviously we look forward to what we're going to see. We're going to have one more show for the year next week, as we recap what's going on in the Copa Paraguay, and yeah, just give our final thoughts on this whole 2024 as we close out another great episode of Guarani Vision. For myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hannah, thank you so much for listening. See you soon.